Hey guys, we're out here today with our 2016 Focus ST build, and we're gonna do just kind of a run through of all the mods we've got on this thing. There's a lot of cool parts that are all pretty affordable and doable, and I think a lot of you guys will be really interested in getting some of these pieces for your car. So we just wanna show you what we've got going on. One of the first things we wanted to tackle with this car was dealing with the stance. And you'll notice we didn't actually change the wheels or tires. These are factory for the ST, just how they come off the lot. But with that, we were still able to tweak it a bit, and what we did was the H&R wheel spacers. We did the 20mm up front and the 25 in the back. Bring the wheels out a little bit farther, get a nice wide stance, and it sits them pretty even with the edge of the fender, so you don't get that weird train car look that some of these have. With the spacers, you can see behind the wheels, we also actually upgraded the brakes to a Stop Tech brake kit, and it's got the drilled and slotted rotors with a performance pad in it. And with the brake upgrades, you can't see it right from this angle, but underneath we've actually got the Velocitech brake ducts, which are a 3D printed duct that just bolts on, really simple part, and channels some cool air up to the actual vents for the brakes. We also added the Rally Armor mud flaps behind here, which personally I really like. It gives a little bit of a rally car vibe to it. Even though we're probably not going to be running this thing through the backwoods of Europe, it still is a neat look, and it does keep your paint a little bit cleaner. With this car not really being a rear wheel drive Mustang down the track kind of drag car, we wanted to focus more on just handling for some better street performance and something that would be fun to take back into twisty back roads. So we added the H&R Sport Spring Lowering Kit. There's just a simple drop-in spring system, and that gives it about a 1.5-inch drop up front and a 1.8-inch drop in the rear, and you get a pretty clean stance overall for the car. It's definitely lower than where factory sits, but you're not just dragging on the ground where it ruins the daily drivability of it. It's very usable. Fitting with adding kind of a track feel handling to this car, we did the iBox sway bar kit for the front and back, and it's a 27mm sway bar up front and a 25 in the rear. A little bit bigger diameter than what you get from factory, and it does just stiffen the car up and kind of bring it together so you don't get as much body roll and weird wobble in it. That pretty much wraps up everything we did for stance on the car, but we did a few other little exterior mods and some other different pieces to give it a bit more of a sporty appeal. You'll notice that the wing actually sits a little bit higher than the factory wing would. It's got Velocitech's wing spacer kit underneath. And these little 3D printed spacers can come in a couple different colors, just like the big mouth kit or the brake system, and they simply just bolt on where the factory mounts would fit. We also have the Stage 3 stripe kit kind of following over the wing and down the back of the car. So if you do get that kit, like we said, it starts at the grille and comes all the way across. So it's not super splotchy or it doesn't look incomplete. We did try to cover all of our bases and get that to look like a proper factory stripe would look. Moving out of the stance and the exterior mods here, you'll notice we actually did replace the exhaust on this car, and it's definitely noticeable when you fire it up, but it's got a really good sound. And we did the Borla Touring exhaust here. It's a catback system. You definitely hear the growl when you fire it up, and you can tell when you get on the throttle that you've got a different exhaust on there. But it's not going to be too overbearing to where you can't drive it every day or it's droning in the cab. It also has a pretty neat look because they do a twin tip design on the back instead of just the single wide pipe that the Focus has from factory. We just like that it's got a little bit sportier style and something that's a little bit more race car inspired almost. Under the hood of our Focus, we got a couple different mods going on, and most of these are pretty simple drop-in mods that you guys could do yourself that aren't going to require different tools or a lift or anything wild. One of the first things you'll see is under the grille here behind it, there's kind of a red trim piece in there, and that's actually part of the Velocitech Big Mouth intake kit, but it just channels clean air right from the front of the car into your intake box, as opposed to trying to pull from a fender or from a hot engine bay or areas where you're not going to get the best air quality. Behind that, the intake actually looks stock on the top here, but we did a K&N drop-in filter, and that gives us a little bit higher airflow as well as the ability to just re-oil that filter and clean it whenever we need to, as opposed to buying a new paper filter and dropping those in. Behind that, you'll see that we also did the MBRP 3-inch intake pipe. It meets up with the factory box, but it does replace the plastic tubing that goes behind the engine, which is the majority of the airflow for this car's system. So with the Velocitech, the intake, and the tube all put together, we get a pretty nice intake system that fits really cleanly on this car, but doesn't require chopping things up or having some big silly filter jutting out the side. With that, we also added a few other mods under here, one of them being the JLT oil catch can, and it sits kind of in between the engine and the radiator at the front here. With turbocharged vehicles like this, the idea is that it'll catch some of the blow-by and the different condensation and oil crap that blows through your motor, things that you don't want inside your engine, the JLT will catch. Two of the upgrades we did on this car that you don't necessarily see just from the top of the hood are the Cobb rear motor mount and the TurboSmart compact blow-off valve. The rear motor mount kind of fits down in the back there and is a replacement for your factory mount. And the idea is that it'll give you a little bit of additional support on the motor, because with these front wheel drive cars, especially a turbocharged one, you get a lot of wheel hop and a bit of torque steering, and that mount kind of helps brace the engine and support some of that and reduces a bit of the wheel hop for you. The TurboSmart blow-off valve is kind of a neat mod. It doesn't necessarily add a lot in the way of performance for the car, but it does give it that exotic turbo sound where you get a lot of the blow-off noises. So we get a kick out of it just because it does add some enjoyment to the way the car sounds. The last upgrade we did under the hood here doesn't actually pertain to modding the engine at all. It's just the Redline tuning hood struts that we added. They basically remove the need for you to have to use your factory prop rod, which gets in the way, especially when it's lifted and you're trying to work under the hood. And it's still pretty easy to close. Don't get in the way of anything. You don't have to worry about it hitting wires or catching on any other parts under the hood. It's a really nice mod to have. So moving from behind the hood to into the cab of the car here, we actually did a little bit to work with engine management. And we actually chose to run Cobb's Access Port V3 tuner here. We're just running a standard can tune, which gets us a little bit better power and a little better throttle response out of the vehicle, and definitely helps out with having the intake mods and everything that we do. The interior of the ST Focus is pretty nice to begin with, so there wasn't really a lot we had to change here, but we did want to protect it and make it a little bit more usable. So we added some WeatherTech floor mats for the front and rear, which are form-fitted to the actual pan of the car. And those are really great, especially if you spill coffee or drop food or whatever else on the ground. You're not going to mess up your carpet or stain anything. It's really easy to pop out and clean them and hose them out. With the mats, we also added the Mishimoto gas pedal spacer, which some of you guys may have noticed with these being stick shift cars, the clutch and the brake pedal feel pretty even, but the throttle pedal sits a little farther back for whatever reason. So this spacer is a simple bolt-on piece that just shifts that pedal a little bit forward, and if you really like to get into it and drive these cars hard, it does make it a bit easier to heel toe. That pretty much wraps up the rest of this build for you guys. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you around.